Good morning, everybody. So this is a live stream question answer session. Anybody have any questions for me right off from the top? Otherwise, I'll go to some of these that I have from emails. If you guys have anything you want to ask right now, feel free to do so. All right. So, not sure how many of these I need to answer today. Someone asked how much my lessons cost. That's a quick, easy answer. The way my lessons are set up, we do, you pay less when you buy more. So you can buy up to 12 lessons at one time. What's the best way to start a beginner? Hello, Leonard. So Leonard is my friend down in South Africa. The best way to start a beginner, you know what? I think the beginners are the hardest ones to teach because they're so very different. Each one comes from a different perspective to now. They each have different lip strength. They each have different, what do you call it? I don't want to say mental capacity. That's not right. Like how much music they already understand. Each one has different levels of ear training. So I think the very first thing when you're starting to teach a beginner, the very first thing is to assess where they are. And inevitably, you will have some area of each of those beginners that is way beneath all the rest of the areas. And that's usually where I start. Now, I should say that I get everybody to start with solfeggio. And maybe I should be doing more of that later in the lessons, but we get away from that eventually. And maybe that shouldn't be. I've been reading more about the solfeggio that other people do, and I'm thinking, it's just so hard to get people to do solfeggio. They want to play the trumpet, and then you get them to stop and sing, and it's a little hard. But yeah, I make all my students do solfeggio first. Then we're going to do lip buzz. And but here's the thing, the lip buzz is not a prerequisite. The only reason we start with lip buzz is because it gives them, on a subconscious level, it gives them a playground, like a mental playground to experiment with this stuff. And the experiments don't actually have to be positive. They don't actually have to be able to do the lip buzz to get benefit from practicing lip buzz. So yeah, I do solfeggio. I will do lip buzz. And that's why we do solfeggio first, because the lip buzz, we don't want it to be just the random frequencies, right? So what else do I do with the beginners? It really, I would also stress that the rhythmic stuff needs to be practiced more at the beginning instead of the note stuff. So we want to do counting at the beginning. So I don't know how you guys do it down in South Africa. We have 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and then for triplets we say lolly, 1 lolly, 2 lolly, 3 lolly, 4 lolly. We do that kind of stuff. There are some people out there that have changed it so that it would be more articulation based. So there's 1 tatata, 2 tatata, 3 tatata, that kind of thing. I don't like that at all, because when you say when you use the other one, you are actually learning the meter. You don't have to have a articulation built into it. Articulation, I believe, articulation should be worked on more in the context of music anyway. I don't want I don't want to introduce articulation at that stage um, ever, really. So so that's really I think the biggest thing with the beginners though is that you want to be sensitive to what their strengths and weaknesses are, because their strengths and weakness combinations are bizarre. This is when working with beginners is when you see just how unique every individual is. Just looking at their strengths and weakness chart, the the differences between from one student to the next are huge, and so you really have to address each of the students as an individual. There can't be a system. So John asks, when will the TMEA trumpet etudes from 1920 come out? That's not until the last week of July. So there's a convention in San Antonio, not TMEA. This one is TBA, the Texas Band Association, Band Directors Association. And during that's when they announce what the etudes are. The books have already been announced. The book for this year's classical all region etudes is the Worm book. So so yeah, that was an easy question. So Leonard, was there any more about anything more specific about the beginners that you wanted to know? That's, to me, the beginner stuff is the most challenging teaching there is. It's harder to work with beginners than any other group because they are so different one to the other. There's no. By the way, that's why I don't have. So I've been working on these books. Like I have the All-State Prep book, and then I have the one that comes before that that's almost ready to publish. I've been working on that for over 10 years, collecting material that takes the second year student through this process that gets them from that intermediate level to a better intermediate level. And I can have a book like that because once you get through that, in my book, it would be called the Pioneer level. That Pioneer level, that's a hard book to write. I have material at the Pioneer level, but that's because of those differences, one student to the next. How do you write a book like that? How do you do that? Because each student is going to have these huge differences in their weaknesses and their strengths. Some of them will have physical weakness. I've had students, I call them hopeful students. So originally I have 7 levels, right? So like in daily routines, I call it group 1 to group 7. But I actually made up a new level. It was level 0. So where we have Pioneer, Tyro, and Player, I now have a hopeful level. And that's for those students that when they first start playing, they don't have enough lip strength to play bottom line E. How would I apply the pyramid to a beginner? Well, that's so I do use the pyramid for these hopeful students that I'm talking about. So for those of you that might not know what the pyramid he's talking about, my first book was called The Physical Trumpet Pyramid. And in that book, I establish sort of a hierarchy. So air, for example, is the foundation of the pyramid. Everything that we do on the trumpet rests on that foundation of the air. Then we have the embouchure, and everything that we do, the embouchure rests on the air. Everything else we do rests on the embouchure. Okay, and so forth. And what this does is it creates a sequence of exercises. We go through that. We go through a set of exercises based on that hierarchy. So the order of the exercises is dictated by that pyramid structure. So we're starting with the air exercise, and we're doing things step by step that get us into the higher levels of the pyramid. So with the beginners, obviously a lot of them can't play notes yet. So the very first thing we do with the beginners is maybe only do the first 2 or 3 things in the first lesson. So we'll do an air exercise in the first lesson. We'll do attempt lip buzz in the first lesson. Sometimes they can't do the lip buzz. That's not a big deal. Sometimes they can, and we'll move on right away. Sometimes they do lip buzz, and it comes out like this. And there's a lot of people that would say, well, then you should play trombone because that's a trombone embouchure. And I don't think it's as simple as that. I do think they would do well on trombone, but that's not the only issue, is it? So anyway, so the first thing we might do is see how far we can get into it. Then the next time we will start the pyramid over again. Hopefully they can get deeper into it. And we'll spend, I guess, about the first 4 lessons on getting through the pyramid. And yes, I will so I give them that first routine. If they have the chops for it, I'll give them that first routine in the Chops Express book. And since they don't know the fingerings yet, we will do we'll put the fingerings in there. Now, those students that don't have the chops yet, which is, I guess, about 50%. About 50% of the students don't have the lip strength to get up to C in the staff when they first start. So what we'll do is we'll stop there. We'll do the air, we'll do the lip buzz, we'll do the mouthpiece placement, we'll do the mouthpiece. But instead of the long tones, we'll do this expansion exercise that I have written specifically for the beginners. And that's not something I publish. I don't know why I don't publish. I guess because it's a tool that I use, and I don't expect other people to actually know what to do with it. So yeah, it's an expansion. We expand first from low C down to low F sharp. I get all of those students that don't have the chops to get to the E in the staff, we'll expand down from low C first. And then from that, once they get those notes steady. Now, for those students, we'll stretch that out for weeks or months, depending on how long it takes them. And I know sometimes they lose. Whoops, just lost my light. I know sometimes they lose patience or whatever, and that's something because if it does take longer, it's more frustrating for them. And for that reason, a lot of times I'll rewrite songs for them that they want to play that are within the range that they do have. So let's say, for example, they only have a range that goes from E, bottom line E, down to the low F sharp. I'll transpose a melody that they want to play into that range so that they have something to work on. But okay, so I'm on a tangent. What I'm saying is, though, that if they can't get the higher notes, we don't move on in the pyramid. Now, there is a pyramid that I have somewhere. Once they get up to the G, second line G, when they can get up to second line G, I have a routine pyramid routine that I've written out for that level of student. And they can start doing the pyramid, a very, very short one. I think it takes about 6-7 minutes for them to do it. But yeah. Now, you know what? During that time, we were also looking at whether or not the mouthpiece is the right size. A lot of times, the reason why their range is so low is because they're trying to play on a 7C mouthpiece when the structure of their face is too big for that. I really believe that the reason why my embouchure was so messed up when I was younger was because of the fact that I was playing on a 7C originally. And my structure's too big for that. So you end up putting it in a position that you can get it in, but then it's not a muscular position. So yeah, the whole beginner thing, that's a very, very, very complex teaching there. Once you get them to where they can play that first routine, then it smooths out. Then you can have a more scheduled, do this, and this, and then these results come out. That's not the case for the beginners. That's not at all the case for the beginners. When you're teaching the beginners, it really is. I'll tell you what. I know you're a Christian, and I pray for during a lot of lessons. With the beginners, I really seek out the wisdom of the Holy Spirit to guide me with them, because it can be very, very complicated. Anyway, when will the Jazz Etudes music be released? It's already released. So are you talking about, this is One Good Mexican. So are you talking about the sheet music or the recordings? Are you still there? Let me post for you a place to get the sheet music. I'm looking it up right now so I can post a link. The sheet music, okay. It's already been released. Every year it's released on the same date. The release date, the official release date is May 15th. Okay? So that's the link to get the music. So this is my first time posting something on the chat. Can you guys see what I just posted? Say yes, somebody. Because I'm still very new at this. I'm not going to say I don't know what I'm doing. I mean, I'm not an idiot, but I don't know what it's like on the other side. I've never. Okay, good. There you go. All right. So yes. Now here's the thing: is I won't post my recordings of the music, even if I wrote it. I won't post my recordings until after it's officially, the music is officially released. So if you hear my recordings are up, then it's already out there. I'm, that's just the way I am. I don't like doing things wrong. It's something that's very important to me. We don't, and that's why, people every year, and I know I said this on the last Q&A, people every year want me to give them the sheet music. And I can't do that. I can't do that. It's not mine to give away. And so, yeah, for this, in the same light, what I won't do is also teach my students that music before you get it. I won't do that. That's ethically wrong, morally wrong, really. I won't do that. So, so yes, if you ever see the etudes up, that my recordings of the etudes, then that's already published. Penders every year has it, but this year I heard that there are other music stores that have it as well. Are there any other questions here for me before I go into some of these email ones? Oh, I was telling you how much lessons cost. So if you, with me, and I know this is a huge range, but with me, if you take lessons with me, the first if you just take one lesson, it's $100. And I know that's a huge difference between our other price. So if you sign up for 12 lessons, and we're talking about hour long because we also offer half hour, and the half hour is always a little bit more expensive than if you took the hour and split it in half. It's always a little bit more expensive because it's more work for my wife. And I won't get into that now, but that's why we justify the prices that way. But if you pay for 12 lessons, you get the same hour-long lessons for $50. That's half price. So that's one of the questions we got in email this week. How much are your lessons? And I think it's good for people to know that because we're trying to encourage people not to just take one lesson. And it's okay to take one lesson. I get people all the time that come in from out of town and they want to take one lesson. That's fine. You know what happens more often though is a lot of times they what they do is they'll still buy 4 lessons. There's someone coming in from out of town, and I think he said August, who wants to buy 8 hours of lessons. And where am I stationed? I'm in Houston, Southeast Houston. So he's coming and he's going to have 8 hours of lessons. Oh no, not 8, 6 hours of lessons, and then he'll go back home. And yes, we do stuff like that too. So that's the point, is that the more you pay for it once, the lower the price is. So if you just want one lesson, it's $100. What else? I have some more. Okay, this one's not actually a question. Someone cut and pastes a Facebook thing to me, and so what do I think about that, right? They're asking, someone was complaining that they had $100 gig and had to fill out a W-9 form. And for those of you who aren't pros, a W-9 form is a tax form that usually is only asked of people who are employees. Now, some businesses will require you to have a W-9 form because they want to be absolutely certain that every expense is covered on their end. And so they're asking me, what do I think about someone complaining about having to fill out a W-9 form for just a $100 gig? And it reminds me of a book I read a long time ago, because there are people that will mistreat a band leader because that band leader only hires him one day out of the year. So he won't be as respectful to that band leader. But this book said, if you have 50 of those leaders that you're working with, that's a gig a week, right? That's a gig per week. So don't disrespect the people that seem like they're on the bottom end, right? In terms of pay. So that's what this reminded me of. What's the big deal filling out a W-9? You know, you know what I just realized? Maybe what bothers them about that, I had never done on me. Maybe they wanted to not pay their taxes on that money. Okay, so now I'm starting to understand. I didn't, it took me sitting here talking about that because I pay taxes on all my money. There might be some things that slip through, not on purpose. I know musicians, if they get cash, they don't pay taxes on that cash, right? It just dawned on me right now, this moment, that maybe the reason they're complaining is because the gig only paid $100. Now they're gonna have to pay tax on that $100. Okay, now I get it. Okay, so if you're worried about that, don't take $100 gig. Okay. Okay, I get it now. All right, so that's just funny. You know what? That's like I said it earlier in this video, right? I said I don't like to do things wrong. I don't like to speed. I don't like to run stop signs. I pay my taxes. I claim every penny that comes in. With, unless it's, something that slips through the cracks. But like I said, the effort is there to pay my taxes. I don't try to take the cash and not claim it. And so that's why I hadn't even thought that way. That's probably what those guys are talking about. Because if you pay taxes depending on your tax bracket, right? That $100 gig now became a $70 gig. And who wants to play a gig for $70? Right? Now I'm starting to understand. Wow. So let me look up another one of these questions here. What's the best trumpet? What is the best trumpet? Okay, there's no such thing as a best trumpet. All right? There's no such thing as a best trumpet. People will say, well, the best trumpet is the Bach. Well, do you know what? The Bachs have, like, I don't know, last time I looked, at least 5, 10 different models. So are you saying that all of those models are the best? So here's something that I like to share with people about equipment. The most important aspects of a trumpet are the inner dimensions. I'm not saying the other stuff is unimportant, but the most important stuff is the inner dimensions. And when we say inner dimensions, we're talking about the bore size, the flare, the bell flare. So when I said flare earlier, I meant the lead pipe flare. So the actual design of the trumpet is the most important part. And different designs create different playabilities, right? So for example, I prefer trumpets with big bells and small lead pipes. That's what I prefer. I'm most comfortable with that. Other people prefer the other way around. So I promise you, because we're talking about, usually when people say, what's the best trumpet? They're talking about the brand. Because we're so brand conscious, right? What's the best brand of trumpet is what they're really asking. But if you look at it from from the perspective that I'm looking at it, that it's the inner dimensions of the horn that are most important. Well, that has nothing to do with the brand. Well, okay, I shouldn't say that's an exaggeration. It has something to do with the brand, because some different brands might be better at designing certain flares or whatever. But that's not what they're advertising, is it? What they're advertising is more the the quality of the craftsmanship, the quality of the metal, and stuff like that. So when we're looking at one horn to the next, you could have the inner dimensions in one brand and then have those very, very similar inner dimensions in another brand. And those horns will play to most people. The way it feels and the way it sounds out front will be almost indistinguishable. You almost can't tell them apart from each other. And it has, so in that regard, now I do understand that with some brands, they claim to have better internal design, like more scientifically figured out or whatever. But here's the problem with that too. Even if that exists, what you need as an individual may not be met by those precise, exact things that they're doing. You know what? Let me give you an example, because everybody is different. What we want is different. Okay? You know how you hear people talking about an instrument that slots real good? You know, I think most times when people say stuff like that, they don't really even know what that means. Okay? But let's say they do know what it means. Instrument slots really good. Did you know that's not necessarily a good thing? Okay? If the instrument slots really well and that note just happens to be out of tune, what are you going to do about that? And let's say it's on a B. Let's say your B is real out of tune, and it slots so good. Well, slotting means that you get to that pitch and it won't move. I just shook the camera. Sorry. You know, slotting means you don't have any give on the pitch. I hope that makes sense. So if a horn that really slots really, really well doesn't have any wiggle room. So there's pros and cons here, right? The advantage of having a trumpet that slots really well is that you're going to crack fewer notes. You won't crack as many notes with a trumpet that slots real well. But you're also going to have a different sound, right? It's not going to have the same dark, warm sound that you can get with a horn that doesn't slot so well. Okay? So, and you know, there's so many things in music that we try to simplify by saying, you know what, A, B, and C is A is better than B, and B is better than C, and C is better than D. And it just doesn't work like that. Because music is subjective. So maybe you like it to slot real well. Maybe you don't. Personally, I don't like a horn that really slots real hard. The stuff I do, I need some wiggle room. So I don't want a horn that really slots. I hate playing on horns like that. I feel like I'm in handcuffs or something, or a straitjacket, right? Playing on a horn that slops real hard feels to me like I'm playing in a straitjacket. No room to move around. So no. So the that's the long answer. The short answer is there's no such thing as the best horn. Notice I don't sell trumpets. I, you know, I did actually try to get a long time ago. I tried to go through the process of getting an endorsement deal like that, and it never went through. Um, and the older I get, the more I realize, I'm not really the best person to be selling instruments because I would tell you, there's no such thing as the best when it comes to buying a trumpet. So obviously, I'm not a very good salesman. You know, music is subjective. What one person likes, another person isn't going to like. And that's really what it comes down to. It's what people like. Let's see. Any other questions? I'm going through my email list here. Okay, it's talking about intonation. I'm not gonna. Okay, so this is actually related to what we were just talking about. Because people say, I want to buy a trumpet that. So a lot of times they'll say, does people will post on Facebook? They'll say, any opinions about this brand of trumpet? Does it play in tune? Does it play in tune? There's no such thing as a trumpet that plays in tune. Now, some of them can be more out of tune than others, but there's no such thing as a trumpet that plays in tune. Okay? There's no such thing. Every trumpet you play on, you have to, I had one lesson with a famous trumpet teacher and player. He's also famous for playing, with Charlie Geyer. I had one lesson with him, and he says, and halfway through, it was a 2-hour lesson, and he says halfway through the lesson, he says the trumpet is a naturally out of tune instrument. And part of the job you have as a trumpet player is making it in tune. You take these physical qualities of the instrument and you just adjust according to the key you're in, or if you're playing equal temperament, according to equal temperament. Okay? But you adjust to make your instrument conform to the tonal system of the music you're playing. Okay? So yeah, there's no such thing as an in-tune trumpet. Now, what happens? And so this is what we're talking about. It's subjective, right? What you hear as being in tune is different from one person to the other. That's something that I had to learn. I think I was 30 years old when I learned that. What one person believes is in tune and what another person believes is in tune, those are not the same thing. And you can do your research on that because this stuff is mathematical. You can do your research on that. There are dozens of different ways to tune, and all of them can be right depending on the context. I had a student 2 days ago that brought in a sheet from his band that he plays with. He's an adult student, but he plays in a band. And when I say band, I'm talking about a concert band. And there were 4 different parts of a chorale written out on different lines. And under each note was a indication of what part of the chord that note was. So, like, for example, if it had an R under it, it was the root of the chord. If it had a 5 under it, it was the fifth of the chord. If it was a passing tone, it had PT under it. Now, The only reason anybody would ever put a sheet out like that is if you are adjusting the pitch for the chord, right? So they say lower the third, right? Okay, that's not equal temperament. That's not equal temperament, right? So if the third is supposed to be lower on that chord, I mean, that's not what I meant. On that, if that note is supposed to be lower because it's the third, lower than what? Okay, lower than what's natural for the instrument, lower than what's equal temperament. By the way, what is equal temperament? Equal temperament is a classical invention, and I say classical from the classical era, not era, um, where all the notes between the octave get equal. So there's 12 notes between the octave. They're equally spaced, mathematically speaking. Okay? Um, and that's what we hear when we hear keyboard music today. That's what we hear when we hear guitar music. But beautiful brass music does not have to be equal temperament. Beautiful band music does not have to be equal temperament. All right? We can move notes up and down. So what we call in tune is not as simple as putting your tuner on your phone and saying, oh, look, it's lined up, right? That's not in tune. Just because you get the frequency to ring out at the exact frequency that you're A440 or whatever, that's not in tune. That's right. Even in equal temperament, that's not in tune, because the word in tune means that you're matching somebody else. The reason we use the tuner, in my opinion, okay, the reason we use the tuner is to get in the right ballpark. And for that matter, I'm going to tell you this. Someone got blasted, and this is the same subject. Someone got blasted on Facebook a few months ago for even suggesting that you should tune just a tiny bit sharp. And they all got in there. They dogpiled him, right? And it was a misunderstanding in the first place. He wasn't actually saying that you should do that. He was saying that his band directors long ago had told him that. Okay? And the people who dogpiled on him have absolutely no understanding about how pitch works. I tune a little bit sharp, a tiny bit sharp. Why do I do that? Because when we tune, we're tuning on C. The notes on the trumpet are out of tune from each other. The reason I tune C a tiny bit sharp is because it lines more of the notes that I use. Now, I might tune it differently in a different musical context, but for most of what I do, I will tune a tiny bit sharp on the C so that all the rest of the notes are closer to where I need them to be. That makes my job easier. It's not. So the reason they dogpiled on him is because they thought what that was that you were supposed to play all of your notes a little sharp. That's not at all what that means. At least not to me. I can't speak for anybody else. And you know what? For that matter, I don't tell. Well, I guess I have taught. Most students, I don't tell them about this tuning a little high thing, because they're not ready to hear that. Okay? But yes, I tune a little high on the C so that the other notes are closer to where I need them, right? It's about playing in tune. It's not about playing sharp. I'm not playing sharp on purpose. When I play the C, remember we talked earlier, it's interesting that all of these different subjects have now blended together, right? Because we're talking earlier about trumpets. What's the best trumpet? And I told you that I don't like an instrument that slots real well. Okay? Because you're not going to have as much ability on an instrument that slots to pull that C into pitch. Does that make sense? If I put, and let me see how, I'm going to look at the tuner real quick. So there's how many? 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, so I tune about 1/10 of a half step sharp on the C. I can bend down 1/10 of a half step on the C and make it, it's not gonna, the tone is not gonna suffer. But by doing that, the pitch is better on that note. But it's also because it's harder to lip something up than it is to lip something down. Okay? It's harder to lip up than it is to lip down. We can do it, but it takes a lot more effort. So if you tune, and like I said, if you look at the number of divisions that they have between the two half steps, I'm tuning about here. If this is C, I'm tuning about here, and this is C sharp. That's how sharp I'm tuning. Okay? Just to give you a visual representation. Here's C, here's C sharp. This is where I'm tuning. Okay? And I can bend the pitch down that much on my horn, and it won't change the pitch. It won't change the timbre. Okay? So, yeah, when you open up that can of worms, the intonation can, it's, one of my very first essays that I ever wrote was called Pitch the Monster, right? I called it Pitch the Monster because I wanted to know, because back in those days, I still wanted to be an orchestral trumpet player. That's what I had worked towards for 10 years of my life. I wanted to play in an orchestra and play jazz on the side. And I'll tell you later what caused me to stop doing that. But the pitch thing kept coming up, playing in tune, right? And I'm the kind of person that I want to understand that. I want to have a deeper understanding of intonation. I just don't want to, because think about it. Play this note higher, play that note lower. How do I know later in another context what to do with that? You don't know. You can't know that. Not without the deeper understanding, right? So what we do is we read. You read, you digest it, and you learn as much as you can about how intonation works. That's when I learned what the different systems of intonation are. We have two categories, right? We have equal temperament, and then we have all of the natural, we call it natural tuning. But it's sort of lopsided because even though there are different ways of interpreting equal temperament, they're all very, very close to each other. On this side, though, it's mind-boggling how many different ways there are to play in tune. It's mind-boggling. And then you put that in context. And you ask yourself, how do I now use this information that I've learned? And it's so complex that I believe, here's what I think. I'll wrap this up and then answer your question real quick. I believe that playing in tune is so complicated you can't do it with your conscious mind. You have to do it subconsciously. And basically, it's something. So you do as much learning and you do as many exercises as you can, but when it comes to the performance, you have to use your ear. If it sounds good to you, if it sounds in tune, it is in tune. If it sounds out of tune to somebody else, that doesn't mean it's not in tune to you. Okay, I know a lot of people don't want to hear that. They want to make it more structured, but it doesn't really work like that. The people who do try to make it sound like that are people who thrive on that power. Okay, I won't go into that now. But the people who want to tell you that it's not subjective are on a power trip. They may not know they're on a power trip, but that's what it is. Anyway, who is the best trumpet player in my opinion? Well, one of the very first articles I ever wrote, and this is back when I was a horrible writer, by the way, was that when we say the best, what we really mean is our favorite, because I don't believe there is such a thing as best. Music is subjective. So when we say who is the best, we really mean who is our favorite. And so who is my favorite trumpet player may not be everybody else's favorite trumpet player. And right now I don't think I have a favorite. You know, when you look at all the amazing trumpet players on YouTube, wow, it seems like thousands and thousands of world-class, top-notch players out there. How do you pick one out of all that? So I do have a page on my website. I put it in a previous video. I'm going to post it here now. Let me pull it up real quick so I can get a link. These are the people who I think are good enough that you should be listening to them. So that's kind of sort of what we mean, right? When we say who are the best, you could interpret that as saying, who should I be listening to? Right? And for now, I only have classical version of this. I haven't done the jazz one yet. I have not done the jazz one. I will eventually. But these are the people, I just posted it now. These are the people I think you should be listening to for classical music. And for those of you who are watching later, this should be in, I don't know how you get to the chats. Like I said, I'm kind of new to all of this. So I posted it in the chat section. I think you can see the chats after after I end the live stream. You know what I will say about the who's the best? I think it's important to, and I know on the one hand, when people say stuff like that, who's the best? I know on the one hand that it's not good for me to go around like correcting people all the time and saying, you know what, you don't really mean who's the best. What you really mean is who's your favorite. I don't actually go around anymore correcting everybody that says that. Okay? because now I understand that they're actually saying what I'm saying. They're just using those words as an idiom, an idiomatic phrase. Like when we say about jazz players, oh, so and so never repeats himself, right? Well, so and so does repeat himself, but that's just something that jazz players say to compliment somebody, right? Jazz players will say, well, so and so is so good, he never repeats himself. Saying, oh, here's another one on the classical side. Uh, People would say, so and so is so good, he never misses a note. Well, that's just not true, but that's what we say when we compliment someone. So I try not to use those kind of idiomatic expressions because they don't have truth in them. Okay? But I understand when I hear other people do it. Now I understand that they're not actually saying what they mean. What they're saying is, hey, I really like what you're doing. Right? I really like that trumpet player. Okay? But I think that said, I think it's important when it comes to recognizing a great player that when we recognize a great player, that we should actually recognize them with truth instead of with flattery. Instead of saying that they're the best, we say that they're my favorite. And because here's the thing is I don't want to encourage trumpet worship. Okay? I don't believe in trumpet worship. And that's a form of trumpet worship, I think. So anyway, what is my range? Andrew Gutierrez is asking me what's my range. You know what's funny is that this is the first time I've had this YouTube channel all this time. You're the first one to ask me that question. I think I've done a good job then. What is my range? So let me tell you, I had my first Super C, people call it double C. My first Super C in performance was in 1990. My range is higher than that now. You won't know that with this trumpet, right? This is what I've been playing on most, and my other horn is in my bag right now because I had a gig last night. So I don't normally do this. This will probably be the first time on a video. So that's much harder to do on this horn. Let me go get my other horn. So that was the D above Super C. Wasn't very good. Let me get my horn. So I should tell you one thing about me and range is I don't play on small equipment like most lead players do. Okay? So my range will never sound on this horn because this is a large bore buck with a 72 bell. Okay? This is huge. And I know that some people play on huge equipment and get that zingy sound. So you just heard me play on this other trumpet. This is even more huge, right? But you heard me do the double D. That's without a warm-up, by the way. I didn't warm up this morning. Like I said, my horn was still in the bag. So that was a very not so good E above super C, right? Now I use that range sparingly on the gigs because I'm not one of those. I do not consider myself a screamer. I know I'm past the hour right now. Let me just wrap this up. I am not a screamer. I don't have anything against screamers except, okay, so the only thing I have against screamers is that you probably shouldn't be, if you're not a screamer, getting advice from them about physically how to play the or even stylistically for that matter. You shouldn't be getting advice from a screamer about how to play the horn, educationally speaking. Okay? Now I'm assuming that when we talk about screamers, I'm talking about those guys that's all they do. Now you have some players out there that can do the screaming stuff. In fact, I've done the screaming stuff. It's part of what I have to do for a living. But howdy. So anyway, so if we're doing, if the person that you're getting advice from is only a screamer, it is false logic to think, well, if he can play that high, then he must really know about how the trumpet works, and that's just not true. Because there's different ways to play the trumpet. What college did I go to? I went to UTEP, the University of Texas at El Paso. That was the first place I went. And then I went from there. I became a pro during that time. I moved to Pittsburgh. I moved to Chicago. I moved back to El Paso again. And then I've been in Houston. I went to the University of Houston for a short period. And then after all of that, I went to a junior college. So yeah, I went to El Paso, the University of Texas at El Paso. Anyway, talking about the high notes, okay? It's just because someone can play highs, there's different ways to play the trumpet. The way that they play to do what they do does not necessarily work outside of that context. Where did I first meet John Glass? John and I met in the parking lot. He was driving a Chevy Bel Air in the parking lot at Andrews High School before a marching band rehearsal. That was in 1978. John and I were off and on best buddies through high school. We used to do a lot together. John and I used to play duets together all the time. And stuff like that. So yeah. And then he went off to Arkansas for college, and then after Arkansas, he went to UTEP, so we got to play with each other again at UTEP. So yeah, John was a very, very good friend of mine. I miss him. He passed away last year. You probably know that. He passed away last year, and people in my life have been dying since we were in high school. But for some reason, his passing affected me more than anybody else, even people in my family for some reason. And I don't mean everybody in my family, but still. Maybe I shouldn't actually say that, but yeah, I've known John a long time. So I hope I finished talking about the range. Was there anything about the range that I didn't make clear? What I was saying was that that's what I was saying, is that I don't have anything against the screamers. I like what they do, actually. I'm not a screamer myself. I'm more of a lead player. And those two skills are not the same thing. They're not even related to each other. There are people that can do both, but they're two different skills. One is very controlled and structured, and the other one is not. Right? Okay? So I don't consider myself a screamer. I'm too much of a control freak for that. And I also know that a lot of what the screamers teach is not for general public consumption. Okay? It's not good reasoning to think that because they can play high, they must have a handle on how the trumpet works physically. It's not good. What is my opinion on jet tone mouthpieces? Just like what I said earlier about trumpets, it's the internal dimensions that matter. If you sound good, I have a real good friend here in Houston, Luis Juarez, and he sounds beautiful on a jet tone. That's all. For all I know, he's still playing on it. Back when we were playing a lot together, he had the most beautiful, big, dark sound. And all he ever had when I was working with him was a jet tone mouthpiece. And in fact, what I just played on right now was a jet tone. So that's not the standard jet tone, but what I just played for you, where I played the E above super C, that was a jet tone mouthpiece. So I don't have, the problem is that people have hang-ups. Once again, it's the same thing as when people say, well, what's the best trumpet? What's the best brand of trumpet, right? So they get hung up with the brand. When it's not the brand that matters, it's the internal dimensions that matter. Okay? It's not the brand that matters, it's the internal dimensions. And the internal dimensions are what create that beautiful sound. So yes, if you find a jet tone. Now, if you're thinking, well, what if I get a jet tone? Can I play high? That's not how it works. Jet tone mouthpiece does not make you play higher. You heard me play the same notes on one and then on the other. That's on a mouthpiece that's so deep that my whole fingernail goes in. That was a D above super C. That the jet tone doesn't make you play higher. What it does is it gives you a more brilliant sound, so that when you do play higher, people can hear it. If I played this on a gig that I have to play high notes on, nobody would be able to hear me. This trumpet with this mouthpiece, nobody would be able to hear me. And the other problem is because it's not even that other people can't hear me, I can't hear myself. So I end up overblowing and I end up getting tired too fast. Right? Does having a mustache bother me when I play trumpet? No, so my mustache doesn't grow where my mouthpiece goes. So, I think it really depends on the person. I've seen people that can put the mouthpiece up over the hair and still play. I can't do that. So it just happens that where my mouthpiece goes, there's no hair there. So it's not a problem for me. All right. Well, this was a long one. Do you have any other questions? Real quick before I wrap this up? No? Okay. Well, good. This is number 3 in the books. We're going to do these for, I'm not going to promise to do them every week, but close to every week. Sometimes I have to teach on Saturday mornings. And then sometimes I have gigs where I have to be out of town, either like a Friday night that's out of town, and then I'm not going to get up and do a video on that next day. So I'm not going to promise that. Or sometimes I know that I won't be doing a video the last Saturday of this month because I have an out of town gig that I have to get on a bus at noon. And I'm not going to clutter up my morning like that. So other than that, we will try to do these whenever I am available to do them. So anyway, good. There you go. Here, another one in the books. God bless all of you guys. And thanks for the questions. I enjoyed it. And we'll see you on the next video. Bye.